All right, good evening, everybody. I'm Professor Jayna Brown. I'm chair of the Department of Theater Arts and Performance Studies here at Brown. On behalf of TAPS, I would like to welcome all of you here to Granoff and to the Queer Duration Symposium. Woo! That's it. This is indeed an illustrious gathering, I must say, of artists, professors, theorists, administrators, students, doyens, divas, and dilettantes. Welcome all of you who've traveled from near and far to join us. This is indeed a momentous occasion. So much has gone into planning and executing this event, and I'll be one of many who are thanking all the staff, faculty, and students who have been working so hard to pull this off, particularly to Melissa Kievman and to Leon Hilton, who has been planning this event for a long time. So, in this terrifying political moment, it is particularly meaningful that we come together and that we commingle, that we continue to live in our bodies and in relation with each other in uncompromising ways. This way may be increasingly risky and dangerous in our current climate, and here at the end of the world, but we do it anyway, and we do it together. The artists performing during this conference, we have Anh Vo tonight, Elliot Reed, XSGN, the list goes on and on. Are you laughing at me? And Dorian Wood on Saturday night, all embrace these kinds of labor, endurance, and durability that this togetherness demands. I'm going to end my words there because we have a jam-packed weekend, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here, and welcome all.
Hi, everyone. Ooh, she's loud. I'm gonna go like that. I'm Thea Quiray Tagle, the Associate Curator of the Bell Gallery and Brown Arts Institute. And on behalf of the entire BAI staff and faculty, I want to warmly welcome you to Queer Durations. Thanks so much for joining us for this incredible 3-day symposium that promises to break open perceptions about durational performance. The Brown Arts Institute was formally established in 2021. Before that, it was an initiative, and established as a university-wide research enterprise and catalyst for the arts at Brown that creates new work and supports, amplifies, and adds new dimensions to creative practices of artists, faculty, students, and wider communities through programming, exhibitions, research-focused courses, initiatives, and collaborations with local, national, and international artists and communities. Initiated by Assistant Professor of Theater Arts and Performance Studies, Leon Hilton, presented by TAPS and BAI as part of the Ignite series, and with additional support from the Pembroke Center's Faculty Seed Grant Program, the Department of American Studies, and the U.S. Latino Studies Fund, Queer Durations precisely fulfills the BAI's intention to present interdisciplinary, challenging, and transformative performance, artwork, and films, to stage conversations between scholars, curators, and artists, and to engage audiences within and far beyond Brown's campus. Many, many thanks, very brief here, to my curatorial co-conspirators, Leon Hilton, Jay Delicave, J.D. Stokely, Ignite producer Melissa Kievman, Professor Jayna Brown in the TAPS department, and the many, many BAI staff members who continue to labor tirelessly behind the scenes to organize Queer Durations. I'm so excited for what we'll be collectively witnessing and experiencing together in the next 3 days. And so now I'm pleased to introduce J.D. Stokely, a doctoral candidate here at Brown in Theater and Performance Studies, and a member of the Queer Durations curatorial team, who will say a few words about the video installations that will be viewable throughout the Granoff building over the next 3 days. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. This is loud, you're right. Oh my gosh. Good evening, everybody. Thea, thank you so much for that introduction. So again, my name is Stokely, and I've had the pleasure of curating the video exhibition in collaboration with Professor Jay Delacave, showcasing the work of 18 exciting artists whose work spans performance, dance, archival research, digital media, sculpture, installation. So with 18 films comes 18 possible conversations about queer iterations. But what connects these works for me is their innovative and risk-taking explorations of temporality, endurance, and queer aesthetics. So to quote Kara Keeling, queer temporality names a dimension of time that produces risk. In Queer Times, Black Futures, Keeling states that, quote, queer temporality names that dimension of the unpredictable and the unknowable in time that governs errant, eccentric, promiscuous, and unexpected organizations of social life, end quote. So I love these adjectives, right? Errant, eccentric, promiscuous, unexpected, and I see them encapsulated in all of these works that will be showing upstairs throughout the time that we'll be here together this week. Take, for example, Carolyn Lazard's Consensual Healing, which blurs the lines between coercion and consent in a fictional EMDR session between a therapist and their client, who is the protagonist of Octavia Butler's story Bloodchild. Or consider the risk in the many vulnerable articulations of care that show up throughout the video works, like B. Heinzman Hope's reflections on meditation, trance, and the intimacy between a performer and their audience. Risk is also explored throughout sound, which echoes in multiple pieces as a laugh, a shout, a wail, a chant, or a moan. If anyone here is interested in a walkthrough throughout this weekend, please just find me. I'd love to talk through some of the works with you. And I'm going to end here with just a big heartfelt thank you to the artists. Alex Veloso, Amber Hawk Swanson, Dave Catt, and Shadore Koroneko of The Harmony Show, B. Heinzman Hope, Carolyn Lazard, Dorian Wood, who's in the room, Elliot Reed, who's in the room, Eva Wu, Jay Delacave, Jova Lynn, Julie Tolentino, Maya Chow, Makini Po, Marlon Jimenez Oviedo, Miata Kawinzi, Naji HF, Petra Floyd, Ray McKinley Terry, and Sandra Ibarra. Amazing list. I also want to thank the curatorial team, but especially again, Professor Delacave for their mentorship, and thank you so much to the BAI production staff, especially Artie Kopicki for their persistent technical support. I'm going to now hand things over to Professor Leon Hilton, lead curator for Queer Iterations, who will be moderating the opening panel. Thank you.
Here we go.
The moment you've been waiting for.
Yes. Okay, so just, of course, to echo gratitude to all of the collaborators, sponsors, the curatorial team, the entire staff of the BAI, whose extraordinary efforts have made this gathering possible, and really a special thanks to Melissa Kievman. We could not have done this without Melissa, so thank you so much. Okay. If you happen to pass this building, this building, on a walk between Waterman and Meeting Streets just over 6 weeks ago, and looked up toward the 4th floor as afternoon shifted into dusk, you might have caught a glimpse of something unusual. A thin golden orange rod suspended in midair, connecting 2 figures, one standing below, the other perched above. This curious sight belonged to Julie Tolentino and Stosh Villa's durational performance, Honey, which took place during the Department of Modern Culture and Media's Elemental Media Conference this past October. Inside the room, the spectacle was a little clearer. Villa, positioned atop a 14-foot hunting blind, poured honey over a thread that descended toward Tolentino, who with her mouth open received the stream. For 3 hours, the two engaged in this poignant, slow unfolding of time. Indeed, the very concept of queer durations, as we are attempting to articulate it throughout this gathering, emerged from questions raised by Julie's singular body of work, which traverses and draws upon lineages of HIV/AIDS activism, underground nightlife, alternative sexual cultures, and queer rituals of mourning and caregiving. These themes and preoccupations are invoked in various ways by the other artists, curators, and performances that will be highlighted over the coming days. So Julie's been with us this semester as a visiting professor of the practice here at the BAI, jointly appointed in the departments of Modern Culture and Media and Theater Arts and Performance Studies. And the symposium is actually our maybe excessive response to the tradition that our professors of the practice and the arts present a public event tied to their work. So this was what we came up with. Alongside today's panel, Julie's class, called Body as Medium, which she's been teaching this semester, has created a durational exhibition that moves, which will unfold over the course of the next couple of days. And we invite you to please take time to explore the gallery upstairs, the Cone Gallery. Tomorrow at 1:30, we'll also be hosting a panel here in Martinos, where four performance studies scholars will offer short papers on her work. But I think in many ways, this event represents the culmination of a dialogue that I think has been going on between us for nearly 15 years. So just a heartfelt thank you to Julie for being here this semester and to everyone who supported her work here at Brown. Okay. So Henri Bergson, the philosopher, proposed that time has two faces. Objective time, the time of stopwatches, train schedules, and deadlines, and what he called duration, the lived time of our inner subjective experience. According to Bergson, duration is the form which the succession of our conscious states assumes when our ego lets itself live. Anyone who's lost themselves in a book or a moment of creative work and looked up to realize hours have passed will recognize, was surprised that hours have passed, will recognize the expansive, elastic quality of duration as Bergson described it. Performance, I think, offers one of the richest opportunities to access this second face of time. And I think those fortunate enough to witness Honey, either here or in its other iterations, can grasp why. Bergson was deeply concerned by the mechanization of time in industrial society, and he feared that opportunities to experience duration were being eroded by the relentless efficiency of modern life. While Bergson's concerns are situated in the 19th century, the idea of a counter-temporality, alternative ways of experiencing time, remains vital across many areas of artistic and intellectual inquiry. But why queer durations? As the late queer theorist Elizabeth Freeman wrote, chrononormativity imposes a linear heteronormative understanding of time, often tied to biological reproduction. So this gathering today, and over the next 2 days, is intended to ask after other modes of experiencing time that are obscured but never extinguished by the force of the chromonormative. The queer durations represented at this symposium resonate with efforts to understand how time functions differently across histories of sexuality, gender, colonization, and racialization. And we're especially indebted to Freeman, as well as to Jose Esteban Munoz, another treasured friend and mentor to a number of the symposium's participants, whose work continues to inspire us in conceiving of queerness as a countertemporality that attunes us to other modes of performance, art making, and collective life. Their absence is profoundly felt, and it's with their memory in mind that we have gathered 3 artists for our panel today, whose work engages with endurance, time, and kind of intergenerational transmission of queer aesthetics, politics, and knowledge. But before we transition to the panel, I just have to briefly cover a few housekeeping points. So the first is that at the conclusion of our panel, at approximately 6:30, the first performance of the symposium will start. Anh Vo and Ethan Philbrick's Introjective Exhibition. The performance is going to start in the auditorium. So you're welcome to just remain in your seat after the panel, but of course, if you'd like to attend the performance, which we hope you do, though of course feel free to obviously leave and return at any time. While the performance will begin here in Martinos, the performers will invite you to follow them as they process to other areas of the building and eventually outside as well. So also just to be aware that this performance does involve high volume amplified sound and vocals. We also want to note generally at the outset that some of the material presented throughout the symposium, including this panel and the video program running throughout the building, do include images of performances and artworks involving nudity, bodily fluids, and other intense bodily practices. So just to say that, yes. Finally, just performances this weekend are nearing capacity based on the RSVPs. So seating for these performances will be first come, first served for registered attendees as well. So we do recommend arriving early for the performances you wish to attend. Okay, so now I would like to introduce our opening panel, Queer Durations, Queer Generations. And for the sake of time, I'll just provide brief introductions as their full bios can be found in the digital program. So first we have Simon Leung, an artist whose practice spans multiple mediums, including video, performance, critical theory, fiction, and opera. His work addresses a range of topics, from the residual space of the Vietnam War to military desertion as asceticism to surfing. And he's currently a professor at the University of California, Irvine School of the Arts. Next to Simon is Jonathan Berger, an artist whose work centers on the practice of exhibition making. While his projects vary widely, the exhibitions themselves are always the work, with each element contributing to a larger whole. From 2013 to 2016, Berger served as director of ADWSE Gallery at NYU, where he curated exhibitions featuring Ellen Cantor, Vaginal Davis, Shu Shu, and many others. And he's currently a faculty member in the Studio Arts program at NYU. Finally, we have Julie Tolentino, whose body of work over the past several decades crosses genres, from AIDS activism to durational performance, sound, and video. In addition to her role this semester as a visiting professor of the practice at Brown, she's also a faculty member at the California Institute of Arts in the School of Art. So that's our panel. And the way we've kind of decided to do this is we've actually organized the discussion by year. We've selected a few years that each of the panelists will be talking about their work in relationship to the particular year that we've selected. So we're going to start, I think.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
This image is from late 1986 or early 1987. It's from footage I shot with two friends who were willing to perform for a video about tea room sex, a project I made in college. 1987 was the year the 43rd issue of October magazine came out. The 8th issue Douglas Crimp edited. How to have promiscuity in an epidemic, Douglas wrote. Is the rectum a grave? Leo Bersani asked. Reading the very last word of the very last sentence from Is the Rectum a Grave, Esquisses, I felt a stronger connection to the idea of and the challenge implied by a word than I ever did before. I know that because I feel the same way today. After I moved to New York a second time to attend the Whitney program in the fall of 1988, a few of us, Ray Navarro, whom we lost, Ellen Sparrow, Catherine Solfield, Tim Landers, would attend ACT UP meetings on Monday nights. On Tuesday nights, almost every guy I knew or had a crush on from ACT UP would go dancing at Dean Johnson's Rock and Roll Fag Bar at the World. In 1988 and 1989, I made pinprick drawings after I read that Marie Antoinette, while imprisoned, wrote her last letter in pinpricks. To draw in pinpricks is to write to oneself in a near invisible porous prose, with a slowness that trained me to think form, a tiny hole which has retained the mark of violence, but simultaneously signifies both the perpetrator of violence and its residue, a split of subjectivity in the process of being held to a sexual representation. I began to think. Verb and noun, agent and repository, the prick cannot decide. It is a punctured word, a phallic hole, a way to think embodiment and inscription, and what I want to say about the melancholy matrix of desire and loss. Was it inevitable that I would submit this thinking to yet another hole, another instance, when another prick would transgress another barrier? I spent much of 1990 working out these ideas, and by 1991, I had made a work, transcripts, some notes between pricks, a meditation on the glory hole as teacher, an essay to transvaluate the wretched moralism of the right, who wanted us dead, and the melancholy moralism within our own community, those of, quote, us, who in fear and grief blamed ourselves.
Okay, can you hear me okay? So I was born in 1980, and I grew up on 103rd Street. This is an image of the store Misen, which was on Broadway between 104th and 105th Street. And even though I grew up around a lot of artists and going downtown quite a bit, I couldn't really name like a artwork or even art experience that stands out, but I could talk to you forever, which I will not do right now, about stores in New York City during that time, during the 80s and 90s. And I think, a lot of that for me was just about how unmediated certain stores were based on the sort of creative independence of their owners. So I think now I look at it and I'm like, stores really were a way for somebody who is a unique sort of idiosyncratic person to have a space that they controlled completely, where they could do what they did, whatever that was. And Misen was owned by a mother and daughter, Marilyn and Patricia Hong, Korean mother and daughter. And I grew up going there, and it really, more than anything from that time, remains like the biggest influence on me. And they sold, among many, many different things. I remember them having pottery from Palestine, dollhouse furniture, cloisonne, lanterns, and rings made of elephant hair. It shaped my understanding of beauty, relationships, display, democracy in many ways, and how people could interact. So that's Misen. Whoops. Oh, no. See, this is why. This is like, will I go the right way? Yes. And then fast forward to 2020, I had an opportunity to do something at the Aspen Art Museum, and the director, Nicola Elise, asked me, she was like, what would you want to do? And I said, I've always wanted to have a store. And so I spent lockdown working on this project of building my own store, which was sort of like somewhere between an exhibit and an archive, a place for people to meet, a store, a very functioning store. And it had like around 400 different types of things in it. And I was able to work with all the people who contributed over this sort of lockdown period. And then we opened in November, December of 2020. And notably, you'll see on the right, there's a sort of counter type object that Julie made for it and drove from Joshua Tree. So this is the store. I'll just give you a quick.
First, I just want to say, it's amazing to be here, just in general, but especially exciting for me to be with Leon, of course, who was one of the first assistants to Honey 15 years ago, which I just want to note. And also just being here with Simon and Jonathan, amazing. Okay, so timer. These are notes because it's the only way I can do this without a kind of amusing. I moved to New York in 1987, and the first kind of job I had was a volunteer job at the LGBT National Suicide Hotline, which was, in the end, kind of really an AIDS hotline. That's ultimately what it was, and it was also kind of a coming out hotline. So that was the beginning of me understanding myself in the world after growing up in San Francisco. I was part of Grand Fury's Kissing Doesn't Kill bus campaign, and Lola often tells the story that I didn't want to do it, and that, you know, how could I have not wanted to do it? And it turned out to be this kind of incredible campaign. But the reason why was I couldn't imagine how they couldn't find, and you know, why there wasn't a pursuit to find a woman who's HIV positive, which we knew in our work as activists that was such an important, you know, person to consult. I had been in ACT UP for 1.5 years by that time. That year was this interesting year where one, Robert Mapplethorpe had died, and it had coincided with this time where GMHC had received the $600,000 grant to make a safer sex kind of handbook. And it was the beginning of the culture wars, where Jesse Helms kind of came and basically stole the money away for the idea of you know, sort of talking about sex, embedding sex and intimacy in the sort of the realm of the revolting. Ray Navarro climbed into us, his circle, and he embedded himself in his study of Foucault. He taught me things that I was never sure I could understand. He culminated us into what we called the Army of Lovers, which was our first show together with Art Positive at the old PS 122 in New York with David Warnerovich, Lola Flash, Anthony Vitti, etc. That was also the year, 1989, of the St. Patrick's Cathedral action. That was actually put together by ACT UP and the Women's Action Mobilization. And we distributed condoms, and I think there were 111 people arrested that year. Ray said, "There is a force within society that cannot be contained. Call it capital Q, capital T theory. Clearly, no one could have predicted the visual representation of this theory." After Ray died, in about 1993, some of us disbanded from ACT UP and moved into other spaces. In 1989, David Roussev asked me to join his company after seeing me perform, and also as an activist companion to him because he hadn't come out as being positive. Looking outside the frame, on one hand, we looked to Ray and his work creating Diva TV that taught about immediacy and reframing narratives. But he expanded something for me, which was to look to the outside of the frame where we would find ourselves, in the margin being the surround that was constantly being policed. Yes, the Berlin Wall's freedom was moving against a backlash, the use of AIDS and queerness and the culture wars. And of course, today, we still feel that. We fast forward to now. Quick, because I'm too far. House of Color Video Collective, Art Positive, Mars, Esquilita, the Eagle at the end of the night, the cruising part where I mingled and got lost amongst Leathermen, and The World where I was a bartender.
In 1992, I met Warren Nieswolowski, the assistant to the director of PS1, where I was an artist in residence, and proposed to him that we work together. He and I were, I argued, shifters within the larger institution, so I thought that while we occupy our roles, we could, like speakers of a language, trace the limits of that language, the institution, the host, with ourselves. Within a minute, I could see the entire piece after he told me he was a deserter from the army during the Vietnam War. What if desertion, the refusal to fight, the dropout from the Corps, is the ethical work against power the way Jayna described betrayal? What if PS1, the building in 1993, was a photograph of the year 1976, when it opened with Rooms, its first exhibition? What if I read back to Vito Acconci, who was in Rooms, a text he wrote a year after the Vietnam War, and replaced every word having to do with art with the word war, a year after the first Gulf War? What if we stripped down to our underwear so that he can teach me the Grotowski exercises he learned during his 7 years in exile? 1994, inserting my body into a test Germany had been administering since reunification. Squatting conjugates the body like a verb tense, queers the space around it in the metropolitan West. I thought about the squatting body since I was a teenager, when my brother told me he was sure that people at a bus stop in the suburban California city where we lived were Vietnamese because they were squatting where there were seats. Did his observation arise from the anxiety that the bodies we inhabit could be misrecognized as those of new refugees? Misrecognition is my medium. That winter, I would return to Berlin to make a public poster project for a show addressing daily violence against guest workers in the former East and former West. Wars in the former Yugoslavia, in the background of Europe, gave us the euphemism ethnic cleansing in place of genocide.
When I was 13, an older student in my high school, who I was doing some organizing with in the high school, invited me to go with them to an ACT UP demonstration. This, thanks to the New York Public Library, is actually the leaflet from that demonstration, which I can't believe out of all the leaflets in the world they have. Okay. And then began my involvement with ACT UP, specifically on the youth committee called YEL, the Youth Education Lifeline, which was made up of high school students and teachers and just general members of ACT UP, and was focusing on sex education, AIDS education curriculum in the school system, among many other related issues. The things that I remember, and I've been spending a lot of time on it, but remember about this time was going to the ACT UP workspace, which I think people don't, who weren't in ACT UP don't know so much about, but it was on 29th Street. This is the building. It's the Haymarket building. And my mom would bring me and have a coffee while I was in these meetings there. So this is like very much on my mind. In the interior of the space, I couldn't get a photo of, but I remember it being quite magical. This I wanted to show just because I don't know, I remember also vividly being in these meetings. This is at the center, the general meetings. The thing that I remember about that moment in 1993 coming in was that there was a lot of fatigue. I was aware, even as like a young person, that there was a lot of fatigue around or in the people that were we thought of as our mentors, the older people in the organization. And there was a lot of excitement about young people being in the organization. And I remember just constantly being shown incredible kindness and support by the older people in the organization. We're not that old, but we really looked up to. The other thing that was happening in that moment was the political funeral movement had just sort of started, and this is an image of the Ashes Action. There were 2 Ashes Actions. I worked on the second one, which was in 1996. But I think that was notable. There was this sort of very particular energy around that. And lastly, I just wanted to share with you, like Yale, we were really interested in doing things that were speaking through the kind of like formats and visual culture of the stuff that we were interested in as young people. And because zines were so important to us, we started doing this Yale zine that we would give out to high school students. And we made it collectively and would pull people in. And I think we did 4 of them. And so this is from issue number 2.
Reminds me of Kia LaBeija sort of set up a campaign and made a sticker. It was like, get up, eat breakfast, cure AIDS. Okay, so this is a safer sex handbook for women that included like plain speak educational text, also kind of sexy speak educational text around safer sex material, safer sex practices, and it was written by myself and Cynthia Medensky, who was at the ISP maybe before you?
My year.
Oh, your year. Yeah. And then we, it was actually sponsored by GMHC, the Gay Men's Health Crisis, and what was called the Lesbian Health Project, and the Lesbian AIDS Project. And we put it together. It was funded by them. Really very, very high quality brochure with condoms and dental dams, lubes, and gloves. We distributed them through sort of, the sort of normal kind of community-based channels, but we also did a very deep grassroots delivery through the Click Club, which started in 1990. Let's see. Okay, all the things really fast, just a list. Red hot and, change. Okay. These things don't link up with the pictures, by the way. So Red Hot and Blues, Safer Sex is Hot Sex poster series, experimental films and projects with Barbara Hammer, Diamanda Galas, Catherine Gund from Aubin Pictures, Catherine Sawfield, Brown alum, Tom Kalin, Ellen Cantor, Ella Traiano, Carmelita Tropicana. I was dancing at the time, which, in the art world, and all of my art activist people thought dancing was cute, but it wasn't art, and it didn't show up anywhere, so nobody cared about it at the ISP, nobody cared about it in the gallery or the museum, but that has changed, as we know. I work with very influential people to me as mentors, like Maria Larribos, Spanish choreographer, Margarita Gergay, and Diamanda. Working internationally with David Rusev and Ron Athey, David's company, was a primarily Black dance company, but we were engaged in same-sex partnering, which outraged many dance communities at the time in the early 90s. And sometimes we struggled quite a lot with companies of color who were aiming to kind of uphold, these positions of trying to receive money, and our work was sort of disrupting that. But then sort of the white dance world was also sort of rejecting and kind of pushing back against some of the work that was being made at that time, David, Ron, Ralph, BB. Pigpen and I, with Ron Athey and Divinity Fudge, performed at Patrick's Cabaret in 1994 as part of a program that was curated by John Kalaki of the Walker Arts Center. There's so much to say, but I want to say we were there. Last, Plague Mass, Derek Jarman's Blue, Bill T. Jones, Still Here. In 1994, AIDS was the highest cause of death in the US. Of course, crossing that with POC communities and Black and brown trans communities changes that even higher than high, just to say that AIDS is not over. And our conversations are staged here by those culture wars as they clearly act as building blocks for today's confrontation with the right. Oh, wait, can I just say one more thing? I wrote down, so here we are in 1993, and I write down this word, fatigue.
(2002). Protease inhibitors changed the terms of mortality we lived with for 2 decades. People started hooking up online. Cruising spots became sites where space opens time from within. I thought it was time to return to cruising and began thinking about an opera that I would call The Side of the Mountain, set in Los Angeles with Griffith Park as its heterotopic mirror. The third act, Proposal for the Side of the Mountain, written with Michael Webster, was shown first in 2002. I live in the 20th century, so sorry. As night falls, 2 men meet at the hour of dusk, while the third calls for his lost dog. The younger man was too young to have lost lovers or friends. But can sex not also be mourning? Eyes on me where only space has known. Haptic and tether like a ball spin around the radius of me, all the goods begotten, invisible circle and half circle, a tree, another tree, a will to bear, a body to coincide. I know where I am. This is a man folding and unfolding, his mass below covering. A man is a large thing, not just his mouth, all of him, all of the man, more than you can hold, can't cover the whole man. I drove here in a car, well, that's what you do, matter in motion, that's how it goes. You drive yourself, you taste your will.
I am here, and this is the man blowing me. This is the one for today, for tonight. Do I count or not? At what point does it begin? Our bodies comparable, no two faces the same. This is the one for today. Particulars, details, like the curve of the tree, semicircle bent, the length of a cock. A body between us, not mine, not his, imaginary body. Color, there is no color. This is this. All points exposed, all points a departure. The radius, what I can see. Measure this man, the texture of hair, the trunk of the body, his arm, his palm, no face, all faces infinite. A dome on the hill to look at the sky. Love moves toward a singular destination. Constant, leave it that way, always the same. If the stars change, you cannot tell.
In 2000, I was in my second year of undergrad at RISD, where a group of students and I had tracked down Ron Athey, gotten his phone number, invited him to come perform in Providence, produced his performance, not knowing what we were doing. He was I remember I went to the hardware store on Wickenden Street, bought a dimmer, like a household dimmer, and clip lights, and made a theater. And Ron was incredibly gracious. And then I quit RISD 2 years into my BFA and moved to Los Angeles. And he was like, and went to CalArts, and he was like, my friend Vaginal Davis is gonna do this workshop with me, you should come. And I went and met Vaginal Davis for the first time. And this photo of me, Vag took the first time that I visited her in her legendary Koreatown apartment. And that's Ron's shoulder. She cut it out and posted it. That's her journal. I think it's probably hard for you to see, but behind my head, there are these little paintings stuck to the wall. And I remember vividly just being what the fuck is that? I was so obsessed with them immediately. And for those of you who don't know, Vag has always made these usually small paintings out of makeup on found materials, found cardboard or stationery. The other image is of a recreation of the interior of her house that was presented as an installation called Present Pinnicative that was shown a number of different times, but it gives you a sense of the paintings themselves. And Vag very quickly, I think it was even the first time, declared herself my mother, and she has many children. But then began what now is, I don't know, a 24-year relationship of working together in different ways. And one of the first, one of the first things that we did together was the first time I ever curated a show, I included her paintings here in New York. So this is the same group, but arranged in that show. And when that happened, at the end of it, she gifted me this painting, which will come back later. And we worked together on many different things. You know, this is like, I think about the year that we're in as the beginning of this thing that's been so present in my life, this relationship that's changed and been so many different things. And I also think about it a lot right now because, as many of you know, Miss Davis had her, I don't know if it's her first major, but anyway, a major institutional presentation in Stockholm that was across like 5 different venues, and one of which I worked with her on a new project of new work at the National Museum, and this is an image of her this year, drawing on the walls of the National Museum for her show. So I don't know, it was a nice kind of moment to be in, watching that happen, and then thinking back all the way to the beginning, which is this year that we're in.
Okay, so in 2002, I'd already been making durational performance, but I was working out ideas. I was trying to like escape from, I'd already like defected from dance. And one of the, you know, I feel like duration was like starting to build through just understanding something about travel and trying to figure out how to, I don't know, put some things together about around caregiving and distance. All of these things sort of murking around me. I was commissioned for a piece at the kitchen. I was paired with a scholar and Dean Moss, curator, who just were sort of stunned by this possibility of doing work like this. It seemed nobody appreciated the work very much, but they really encouraged me to continue. And the only other people who kind of supported me were my friends John Lovett and Alessandro Codignone, who ran a party around the corner from the Click Club at Pork, which was them doing this kind of party in a leather bar with like a sort of heavy leather theme, but a little bit of a fuck you to like Leatherman terms. So they allowed me to use their stage, and I used the beginning of the Click Club to practice, work out ideas, have a studio. So I really used this sort of studio practice to the back of Leatherman for years. And eventually, little by little, they turned around and became like my studio visitors and gave me advice. The person who helped me move through this transition from dance into durational performance in one of the strongest ways that wasn't with other artists was Leah Ganjitano at Participant Inc. She hosted this performance space. Well, she hosted the gallery to me. I don't know, she just gave me the gallery for a summer. And a work came through, which was called For You, which was a work that was a one-to-one performance, but also durational. So it happened over 8 hours a day. But as an audience, you could choose when you came, like just all full audience agency. And I just want to say that was also the year that was a true story about 2 people was made, also with the support of Participant. It was for the first Performa. And also it was when Leah and I took a tour for a possible participant benefit at the National Arts Club, when I looked up at this decrepit old building and said, I would like to be a chandelier in a honey suspension. Having done suspension works in the first years of my making work in the leather bar. And what that sort of turned out to be something that would occur in 2024 as a chandelier. And the honey would be responsive to its site, right? That was sort of the understanding of the honey in the beginning. It was to help me to learn what work can do, what it can break open, how to let go of becoming instead of seeding. Instead, I was hoping to seed the idea of the dissolve The dissolve in front of you was the only way to know me, and it then turned into intimacy, the dissolve in general as a politic or an insistent way to not produce a single being.
By the turn of the millennium, a decade before, Warren had lost his job, his relationship, and his apartment. Long after desertion was his occupation, he had become a professional dinner guest, a professional house guest, a cosmopolitan nomad, his term, who had depended on the kindness of friends or strangers as new friends to give him a bed. When I learned of this, I said to him, "Let's make another work." My only thought at the start was that Kant's perpetual peace would be the script. But for about 8 years, we would meet, but we did not know what that work would be. By 2011, we somehow made a film, War After War, which, when shown in a theater, is feature length, but while in a gallery, is played on a loop and does not begin or end at any point. I learned from the gallery attendant that Warren would come to the gallery every day and watch the film. That's when I learned that all along, I am someone who makes work for the subject. It was for Warren, because he needed it the most.
Um, 2012 was a pretty significant year of loss and unexpected. So I had moved all of the things that I owned, including all my studio stuff, into a friend's farmhouse in Glover, Vermont, where I now continue to live part-time. And so I had all my stuff there, and one night the house caught on fire. So it was a total loss. And the three things that I took were the painting Vaginal gave me that you saw before, my laptop, and some notes. And this is the painting right now in my new bedroom in Glover, Vermont. And the other thing that happened in this moment, or had been happening, is I developed the 6 years prior a very close relationship with the artist Ellen Cantor, who I met through Leah Gangitano and at Participant. And Ellen and I had become incredibly close, and I'll talk about it after, but that relationship ended up being one of the most significant in my life. But Ellen in this moment got sick, was diagnosed with cancer, and died in 2013. And that was also the year that I got the job at ADWSE and was in a position to make a presentation of her work, which I did in conjunction with Leah and a number of other people. We all sort of got together, and with Julie. Many of us who knew her put together this multi-venue project, presenting her work in many different ways. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to share the titles of, oh, is this really where we are? Oh, wow. Okay. This work was called Raised by Wolves. And it's very hard to see, but in the centerpiece, if you look closely, you'll see the thin gold thread that was set up as a set of stairs. I had just joined Commonwealth and Council Gallery, and Young really wanted me to make a piece like right away. And I was like, I don't know. I dreamt about a fire in your gallery, and I don't want to do a show because I don't want that to happen. And he said, well, let's figure it out. And he started opening up the walls, and we slowly opened up a million walls, and we found that there was a fire in the backside of this gallery, which used to actually be the home of an artist. The piece was ended up being, so we pulled down the whole wall, and I built the staircase to sort of mirror that, and we bore a hole at the very top where they had bricked closed the entry to the roof, and that work is called Hole. And when the work was collected, it was with Leung in a collaboration that he helped me understand how to bring that piece together. This work is called In the Red. It was a piece that we always do, Pigpen and I've been working with Pigpen now for many years, obviously through the time with Ron from the 90s, but Pigpen and I from around 2008, 9, started working together exclusively as a couple, open, but a couple as duets. But this work was, continuing our work, sort of using, sort of thinking less about blood work around sort of the image, but more affectively and more sort of around sex practice. And so in the top photo, you would never see that because it's we use always red light around our use of blood, so that it's not about sort of the oozing of the blood, but maybe more of the feeling of what it is that's happening between the people. And as many people know, we start every performance with a cut as a way to sort of stop the moments up into the point of the performance to open up the performance differently. And the work in the center is called Shatter and Center. I need to stop talking, so I'm just going to say that after this project that Jonathan was talking about was with Patty Hertling, we restaged Coming to Power, 25 years of sexually explicit art by women, and that was the first show after the Army of Lovers show that I was in 1993 as an artist, and Ellen invited the Click Club as my artwork, and it changed my way of understanding what we were doing and what artwork could possibly mean. And I remember I wrote it somewhere here where I just was like, if I only knew, I was waiting for the Leon Hiltons, the Josh Lubin Levy's, the Josh Letzen Chambers, the J. De Leons to come to help me understand how that would become something that would be worthy of study. In this program, we curated a performance program to kind of honor the part of the Click Club that we were not going to obviously put into the show. Probably all recognizable artists here: Keila Beja, Narcissister, Neva Costa, and Sandra Ibarra. And the last thing I want to say is the honey had been ongoing, continuing to go, and when we performed in Abu Dhabi, we smuggled back the honey that collects at my feet in oud bottles, and we brought it back, and this is from a work that's a permanent piece in Commonwealth and Council. We chipped out one of the concrete blocks and replaced it with the honey, and for the last 10 years, it's been slowly kind of degrading with us and our bodies.
"2021. I am a stain sighted on the surface of the screen. At times, I may appear as a mottled abstraction, at times mirarical. At times, I may resemble a dark spot, a silhouette thrown against light, caught in a grid. The year before the pandemic, many people died, as if they were rushing for the last train out of town. Among them were Douglas and Warren. City of Squatters had a title before it had a form. I didn't know that it would be a Zoom performance or that it would take place less than a week after January 6th. All I knew was that, like the pinprick and the glory hole, Warren and the squatter that occupied me for the previous 3 decades should be read with each other, because each looked for the same thing, a place to rest. I had split into 3. Imagine a city of squatters, an entire city in which everyone created their own chairs with their own bodies. When you are tired or when you need to wait, participate in this position. Observe the city again from this squatting position. What time is it there? Photographs of a Cantonese opera troupe in early 20th century, taken not long after the 2-year pandemic of 1918, almost disappeared entirely. These remnants from May's photography studio in San Francisco were being thrown out, but they were salvaged because someone thought that we should know their history. Do they know our history? Do they know the cadence of our fever? What is the use of art but for the people before it to synchronize themselves with its order of time, to tell the time of the viewer's life as a fragment of this image? At the memorial, Warren was praised for his beautiful French, his unique learned German spoken as a written language. Warren, someone recognized your Polish soul and how language gave you homes the way your friends gave you beds. Joan read from your emails, and I read some morsels of your collage of quotations grafted onto more quotations. I thought your leather pants were as good a medium as any for a drawing. Worldwide Warren. I remember buying at least one of those pairs for you, and when you took them to the tailor, when we took them to the tailor to have them altered, she could not understand who you or what our relationship could possibly read that again. I remember buying at least one of these pairs for you, and when we took them to the tailor to have them altered, she could not understand who you or what our relationship could possibly be. Who is he? She asked. A friend, I said.
When Ellen died in 2013, over the next year, I kind of couldn't shake in the process of mourning and trying to sort of process everything, that the relationship that I'd had with her, which was a friendship, wasn't like any other relationship I'd ever had. And I was it was like gnawing away at me, and I was like, what is this? And then, I came to sort of realize, appropriately because of her and her kind of the way that love permeated all of her work and so much of her thinking and the way she moved through the world, that I was experiencing or had experienced for the first time what people describe true love as in the space of the friendship with her. And so then over the next 6 years, from like 2013 to 2019, I was immersed in making this project, which looked at that idea of the depth the depth of a relationship that's associated with true love, which is normally reserved only for romance, existing in many different kinds of relationships based on many different kinds of bonds. And that ended up being lots of different sort of paths I went down, finding people and animals and interviewing people, and that ended up turning into this exhibition called An Introduction to Nameless Love, which was a collaboration with many different people, the people whose stories were in it, and then also with about 47 different people who worked with me in different ways on building the show. And these images are all from Participant Ink Gallery. The show is both at Participant and at the Carpenter Center, and then in the Whitney Biennial in 2022. And this is just to give you a sense of what it looked like. It was 6 chapters that you sort of moved through. The pieces were all, it was like 33,000 tin letters that we soldered by hand to these sort of nickel scaffoldings, each of which told the story of the relationship in a different way. So this is what that was like.
In 2021, I was in grad school. I went back to school, and I was supposed to make a performance for my final project, and COVID. So again, here's some titles. So this work was called Sending Out the Smoke of Future Fires, 2021. It included an online digital element, but the main part of it was to send out, I can't remember exactly the number, but maybe 75 or 100 of these packets, which were vacuum sealed, what I called a performance provocation, which was to ask people to burn the contents as a performance collaboration. In that time, I also asked people to send back the ashes. Repeater was a work that I made while I was in school at the gallery, my second show, 108 hours of performance with a cut at the top of every hour. It was an exhibition in motion. The same year, I was commissioned by Performance Space New York to make Slipping into Darkness day and night. Daytime was a durational performance, an exhibition with a video and a reflecting pool, which was another mirror work. And at night, there was a pool in a 14 by 16 tent that was gold gilded on the inside. It was a one-to-one performance where I asked audience to come one by one at a time, to consensually drowned. So we would work above the water floating, and then I would bring them underwater as part of a long-standing bodywork practice that I have, both water and standing and land. This work for Jonathan's The Store is called The Counter, The Wall, and The Governess, which was a scent that was made from the oils distilled from my Joshua Tree land and or my shared land, and a collaborator from Oman. Next to that was a work for Art Basel that was a work that's called Forever Young, and it requires the gallerist to change the shape of these 27 cubes over the course of its exhibition. The titles I want you to know are Echo Position, the Global Equity International AIDS Activist talk, Hold Tight Gently, which was an 8-hour performance that was accompanied by Let's Talk, a focused seminar for 8 hours that ran concurrently to Hold Tight Gently. And that was focused on the work of the What Would an HIV Doula Do group, which I worked with very early on and throughout, kind of pop in and out now. And I want you to know the names of the works because I think the work is my writing.
It's the switching it up at the end. My mother was born in Kaunas, Lithuania in 1941. Soon thereafter, Lithuanian nationalists and Nazis took over the city. My mother and my grandmother went into the Kovna ghetto. They were taken out of this apartment, which I now hold the lease on, and went into the ghetto. My mother was smuggled out in a bag and hidden through the war. And I went back for the first time in 2017 and have continued to go back now. It's been many, many times. And through a very strange series of events, figured out what apartment building they lived in. And the day that I found the address, which we had a series of false addresses because the streets changed, but the day that I found the address and went to the building, the owners of the apartment, the tenant had just moved out and the lease had come up that day, and I just rented it. And I still have the lease on it. So this is the space. We just cleaned it up. And I've been working there on a new, what will it be? Kind of just sort of following different leads and stuff. And the other thing that's been happening simultaneously is I was part of an organization called JFRIJ, Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, at the same time that I was involved in ACT UP, and there was a lot of back and forth between those two organizations. And one of the people that had made a major impact on me was Melanie K. Kantrowitz. She was the first director of JFRIJ and the first person that I met who, as a young person, who articulated an anti-Zionist position, was doing a lot of writing about non-nation state-based Jewish identity, statelessness, and ended up doing a talk at a conference in Chicago in 2000 where she delivered this sort of proposition vision of returning the law of return. Back in that.
Do we in fact make work out of a queer divine dissatisfaction that saturate us? Is queerness not already a form of duration? What if generation is not difference across time, but something within each of us? What if queerness is not a function of narrative, but nearness? The escasis that abides the time of the drives. It took 22 years to make another act of the opera, this time with Luke Stoneham. The second act would take place in a house near the park, and I would use the operatic conceit of the lady and the maid, but they would be Asian and Latin American immigrants occupying different class identities. The woman who owns the house, a capitalist who made a fortune from manufacturing and real estate in a gentrifying Los Angeles, and the undocumented housekeeper, a mother who wants to become an artist. When I ran into Julie Tolentino at an Asher Hartman performance at Joan, an art space in LA, I asked her to play the figment of each woman's imagination in their respective arias. Here she is the sister with the long blonde hair. And the brother with whom the housekeeper crossed the border. And P22, the mountain lion, who was believed to be about 12 years old when he was, quote unquote, compassionately euthanized. All that is solid melts into air. Everything standing disappears. All that is sacred is desecrated. Between you as you and me as me, with sober eyes, what do you see?
This work is called The Flood, the Vessel, the Commune, How Do We Find Each Other? It is a work made of hair that was donated by friends, and it's dunked into these barrels, and it grows over time. The show was up last summer, and so was this incredible show curated by Anna Sue Hoy that Simon was in. And they asked for images from the photos, and they inserted folks into their show by projecting our works onto the walls. And mine was on a wall next to Simon's work, his piece. And it was very significant for me because I don't often, for many reasons, don't talk and don't get included in things that sort of are race-based. And so I sort of felt like, I got seen. These are the works that I just spoke about, Slipping into Darkness. There's also a project called The Sky Remains the Same, in which I offer sort of the body as a container of record that's worked out with other folks like Lovett Koninyone, Stanley Love, David Rusev, and Ronnie Thee, Franco B. That's other work is called Repeater, which is a little bit of what we are kind of playing with upstairs. And just to say, this work is called Bury Me Fiercely, very much part of this process that I'm going through here and in the body, this notion of aging. And I was sort of thinking that all the work is something like a clearing, a way of building and breaking, thinking obligation and fidelity as forms of ruination to get me to you and vice versa. To stop being the police in ourselves and to each other. So managers of all areas, I think we must take note.
Thank you, everyone.
Amen.